Well, here we go. Episode 4 of the Chase Merrell Podcast. I got my guy, my bro, one of my best friends as well, Wes Wimberly, on today's episode. Welcome, Wes.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
I'm so pumped you're here.
Let's go, man.
Man, this is, again, 52 project. So, like, 52 episodes of conversations with 52 different people who have made an impact on my life and are still making an impact in the world around them. And that's why you're here.
Yeah.
You've made a big impact in my life. You're still making an impact in my life, and you're making an impact in the world around you on a daily basis. We've had a lot of fun, like, in our friendship over the last, it's almost been, 5 years, probably. Yeah, I think so.
6, maybe.
Okay.
Really 5, though.
Yeah, really 5. Our first.
That first year was kind of like we're
kind of used to rub shoulders, and I was like,
yeah.
who the heck is that? Super swaggy, fashion icon,
Whatever.
next generation fashion
I had no
icon.
clue what I was doing back then.
Yeah, but see, the way you walked around with like your swagger and confidence was literally nobody else at Living Water, which is the church that we were, part of, had the same level of swagger and confidence. Yeah, and it always like it did two things. It intimidated me and inspired me at the same time. I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, I feel like just from a fashion standpoint, your fashion has completely changed since you got here in 2017. I don't know if you've realized that. I don't remember the last time I saw you wear like a short sleeved collared shirt, like as tight as it was in 2017.
I had a lot. I felt like I had a lot to prove.
Now.
I had a lot to prove when I first got here. I mean, like I came in and I met a guy named Stephen Mulkey who, like filled out his shirts and he always brought like that kind of like collared kind of game to the table too. So I think that was part of it. And then I really wanted to like set the temperature of like I'm a relevant youth pastor.
Yeah, totally.
Did you ever see me in that big long shirt?
No.
I think I wore it like once or twice, like right when I got here, and then quickly realized like
this isn't it.
This isn't me. and it's nobody else here, so this isn't even a win for anybody. Oh, but man, so I want to introduce you a little bit.
Yeah.
But then I'd really let you introduce yourself and have a conversation today. I mean, this whole podcast is really about helping get people freed up from what's holding them back to get built up into who they were made to be. Yeah. And so we'll talk about that a little bit today. But and then, man, you've had a lot of life changes over this last year or over this last couple years in this season between getting married, which was a few years ago, having your first child. 5. Oh, for real?
Yeah.
Okay, so, oh my gosh,
COVID. It was a year after you got it.
You're right.
Yeah.
COVID kind of just...
Yeah, COVID feels like,
it was a blur and also an eternity at the same time. You had your first child.
Yep.
You've had some ministry transitions and leadership transitions. And then some just life stuff that we'll dive into today. But so here we go. You are Wesley James Wimberly, son of Tim and Dana Wimberly.
Yep.
Youngest brother of 5 Wimberly boys, men.
Mm-hmm.
And you are currently a youth pastor at Living Water in Olympia. Give me a snapshot of how long, I mean, just your marriage, like you've been married for, like you said, almost 5 years, and then just a little bit of that part of you, and then what you're doing in youth ministry. Yeah.
So married to a beautiful human who will probably listen to this podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like she's becoming more of a podcast girl. She's going to question why I called her that. But
what's her name?
Huh?
What's her name?
Her name is Amanda Michaela Wimberly.
Amanda Michaela.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about
totally. Siri.
Siri.
Call my wife. Calling Amanda Michaela.
With some accent.
I change it. Sometimes it's Australian. I think now it's like South African. So
okay, sweet.
Switching it up. So we've been married since 2018. We did an internship together, like all Christian couples, I feel like. It's kind of the stereotype story. We are the stereotype story. We both grew up in church and loved church. Her parents were pastors at one point. My parents have been pastors their whole lives. Now we're missionaries. And so we got married in 2018. I've been married for 5 years this August.
That's
and
awesome.
It's incredible. So, and then we just had a kid. Her name is Sunday, like the day.
Let's go.
And she's the light of our world, and we love her a ton. I was just leaving the house to come here, and something we do when I leave is go to the window and just kind of wave from the window, and it she just lights up. It's awesome. So that's where we're at. And then we're youth pastors, and so we both work at Living Water. And I'm just gonna go for it. My wife said something this morning. She's like, I'm either hanging out with teenagers or hanging out with you on Sunday. And I thought that was a beautiful picture of our kind of life right now, because we're just leading young people and teenagers and pointing them to Jesus, and we love it.
And you're giving your all for it. So like it's your time, energy.
Yeah, we're all in.
Go into that space, which is kind of one of the things I want to talk about throughout the conversation today is you have a lot of unique things about you.
Yeah.
I had several that just went, and I was like, that's not necessarily for the conversation, but I appreciate also have been intrigued by different areas of my life with you. But I mean, one of the big things that's marked me is you were raised in the church by pastors as mom and dad, and then became missionaries, right? So they've always been in full-time ministry since you've been alive. The youngest of 5, and then you've worked at a church or been in ministry for basically your entire working life.
Yeah.
You had one yogurt shop window, right? I feel like.
Yeah, but I was like 16.
Okay, yeah.
You know?
Right. So
post high school,
right.
Well, even before high school, I technically worked at a church, but post high school, like when you go get a job,
right,
has all been church.
Yeah. Right. So how do you still love Jesus?
Yeah.
I mean, like for real though, I think about part of what like marks you is you aren't bitter or. I mean, you probably have had seasons of bitterness, right? I mean, I'm sure you'll talk about that a little bit, just walking through the ups and downs. But like, I just think part of what stands out about you, Wes, is that you've got all of this, raised in church, have only really had ministry church experience from a job point of view and a life point of view, but your love for the Lord is authentic. You actually love Jesus. And then you actually love people with the love of the Father in a way to reach them with Jesus and to give your life to it. And you're still doing it. I mean, you made it through the pandemic stuff of ministry, which like I felt like took so many people out.
Yeah.
You're in still probably the middle of the generation that's really walking through some degree of deconstruction and challenging or questioning their faith and their beliefs in the Lord or the structure or the organizational, whatever's of church and ministry. You've been a part of those relationships and you've been in the heat of it, but you're still here. And you're not like here begrudgingly, like, God, I hate this. I'm just doing this until I can get out. Like you genuinely still love Jesus. That's rare. It feels like.
Yeah.
It so stood out to me because I don't know a lot of people like in my life that like have been raised in the church and ministry and are still going like, yeah, like I love the Lord. Life's not easy, but I'm still wanting to grow in my relationship with the Lord and still be in the ministry space. Yeah. So like, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, why do you think that's there?
Yeah. I mean, that's such a loaded question.
Sure.
So there's so much to that. I want to preface with the fact that like, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but like to be still here. Yeah. Is like, it wasn't easy. Yeah. It isn't easy. Yeah. And so like, I don't know, to anybody who feels like, I'm still trying to be faithful, like, it's not all pretty. Right. So like,
and I got to be I have been a part of your life over the last 5 years, but when we did 2.5 years of ministry together, I guess I should have said that too at the beginning. Yeah. We worked really closely together, is where we
Youth Pastors for Life.
Let's go. Youth Pastors for Life in a way that like we went up and down in the trenches and then to some mountaintops, etc. And I get to really see the authentic part of like, it wasn't always like, I love Jesus and I'm great and ministry is what I want forever. Like there were those seasons, to acknowledge what you're saying, it wasn't like, but you did it authentically. Yeah. Continue. So keep going.
Yeah. So I think that as just a preface that like no year had a perfect, perfect streak of just like, this is awesome. I love it. And so that's just a reality. I think I can just hear a lot of things and think like, man, like they're just, I think even like personally, like, even just after all that you said of me still being here, I still look at other people and think like, man, they just really look like they like are loving it right now. And I don't feel like that, you know what I mean? Like this is really difficult. Like how, and so there is a reality that like, it's really tough to like, and to be honest, like when it comes to that, like, I think there's just a reality that like, I think like Jesus just had like I think what I'm realizing, I even said it to a couple days ago to a student, thinking like this, it really does have to become real. Like it's like a real human Jesus from literally the city of Nazareth. Like it's not it's just, it can just become so like
fairy tale
illustrated,
sure.
you know, to where it's just this story. And I think like we have to come to grips with like this like, it's more real than you realize, and we're just so far removed that it can just feel so distant and far away. But like the person of Jesus was fully God, and he entered into humanity, and like that's a real thing. And like so yeah, some of it's not going to make sense because divine entered human nature, and that's freaking crazy, bro. Like that, like that's a wild thing that like I just wish more people would come to grab a hold of, because that for me, like that gives me so much more peace in like all of the things throughout this journey of being a part of the church and loving ministry and loving Jesus and loving people. Like it's giving me some sort of peace, and this isn't always easy, but I'm learning as I'm getting older, like it's giving me some sort of peace that like, okay, it's okay that some of this doesn't make sense, and some of it's like in some like legit tension, and I just kind of have to like live in that tension, and like kind of the Deuteronomy, 29:29 or 31:31. I don't know. It's all I know is that it's the doubles. But it's like the things that we don't know are God's mysteries, and the things that we do know are the things that we need to know. Right. And so I think there's. So I think that's part of it. And I think the second thing I think of is like, Jesus has to become like King and Lord, and like, and I like saying this word because I think it's a little like, I think there's a little bit of a weirdness around it because of like, even just like American history and culture, but like Jesus is our master. And there's this like kind of piece to that can feel a little bit like, well, like, go live your life. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. And it's like
nobody owns you.
Yeah, well, actually, Jesus is our master, and so I read the Bible and I go do what it says. Right. So, and I just think for a lot of people just that's not how they live. Well,
so, but even that statement right there, like I read the Bible and I just go do what it says, right? Yeah. Or Jesus being your master. It's still the thing for me that is hard to understand how you've not only turned out to who you are now and still are who you're becoming. But how this is so real for you still is you were raised in church, and had Christian parents who were pastors on top of that, and have only been around all of this stuff. So you've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly.
100%.
Like, and again,
all in the same church.
Right. One church, one community. You've seen people come and go. You've seen stuff. And so, like, that's the thing that just still blows my mind. Yeah. I can hear somebody else's testimony that's like they were in some crazy stuff and like, always drunk or on drugs or whatever else, like just lost themselves. And then they had this collision. Jesus became real to them. And then they got this love. To see somebody at 20, how old are you?
26.
26. Okay. Like
or,
bottom
or in pure Chase manner. Like 26 and a half.
Okay, let's go. Come on. Gotta be official. Detailed. So you're a bottom end millennial, top end Gen Z, but probably more millennial, right? But like that, like tell me I don't see there's so many that like they saw so much hypocrisy, or they saw so much two-face. Like I say one thing but I don't actually live it. We talk about Jesus as Lord and Master, but our lives actually aren't submitted to him. So but let's put that on to just all of that stuff. Like what helped make it real? Like you said, you really got to see Jesus and know him and have a relationship. Like what in your life brought that to the fold? That wasn't just you saw it all around you and they told you this is what you got to think and this you got to fall in line and be this. How did it become real to you?
To be honest, I was thinking about some of this a little bit last night, just thinking about I think one, to start with, there's some sovereignty of the fact that like the family I grew up in and the people that I was surrounded by, like I think that's just like at least I look back on that and I think, man, I'm really thankful that like I grew up in a family that like loved church, and like it was a gift. And that was probably because my dad kind of is more of the story that you just shared of like my life like crap hit the fan,
Right.
and now
He has a pretty incredible testimony in that way.
And so I think there's some reality to that.
Shout out to Tim Wimberly, by the way.
Romania.
If you're listening, you probably will listen to this. Shout out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some things that come to mind for me is like everybody experiences doubt. Like nobody's immune from doubt. I think it's just like some people experience it earlier, and then for some people, like doubt just catches up.
Yeah,
and so I think there's a reality that's okay.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, like I doubt things all the time. Like I'm still doubting, and figuring that out, and I have to walk it out. And I think for me, what honestly kind of pisses me off a little bit is how people take things that happen, because I've experienced church hurt in my own church that I pastor at, and I've experienced some things that like weren't great and weren't done well. And it's just like, I've just come to, at least I feel like this. I just feel like me and my wife have just come to this resolve, like, we're not going to throw Jesus and his church out with the bad Christians that like represented him poorly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's going to happen, but I just don't want to throw Jesus out, because that's not who Jesus is, And so, I think that's part of it. And then honestly, I think there's some reality to the fact that like, I just haven't left.
Right. You just haven't given up yet.
I had some bad days, some bad weeks, some bad months, but like I just stayed.
Yeah.
And
it's not that you also didn't have the opportunity to leave, because
no,
I know you've had plenty.
Yeah,
you still
even coming into like when you hired me as a youth pastor, right. I mean, I had 3 or 4 options on the table.
I was praying on my knees, God, please. I know he's got better options on the table, but I want this dude.
And I don't say that to like toot my own horn, but even like after high school, like I was literally signed up for another program. I was headed to San Diego,
right? And
then I got rerouted and I ended up staying. Thank the Lord, because that's how I met my wife, and we got married, and now we have Sunday, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
But I think there's some reality. I think just some people just quit too early.
Yeah. And
they quit too early on the doubt journey, and I think there's just, again, the whole thing about like the tension, like you're not gonna understand it all. Like I just think like there's such this like I don't know if it's just the entitlement because we have access to everything all the time now.
Right.
But it's just like, it's this like desire, like we need to understand everything. And if I don't understand it, then I begin to distance myself, and so I think there's part of that. Like I just know that I'm not going to understand everything.
Yeah.
And that's okay. I'm still going to give my life to this. And then I've just never seen and part of it, like I go to church every Sunday, and I have for 26 years. Right. And I've never seen anybody grow in their love for Jesus by exiting the church. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And so I think that's part of it. But to be honest, I feel a little like I don't know. Like, is there something like I'm not seeing? Like, or I can go the opposite side and get kind of prideful, like I'm built different, like,
right. Right.
And I honestly don't know. And it breaks my heart a little bit, like thinking about people who just feels like they just, I wish they could see this a little bit differently. Sure. Or
well, then that brings a good point to the table too. Like you said, like you haven't seen somebody that's walked away continue to grow in their love for Jesus.
I think church is essential.
Yeah.
So,
but I would like, not to counterpoint it, but like something that now that I've stepped into leading a church over the last year, and have been a part of ministry for 11, 12 years, full-time as a vocational pastor, minister, and then my whole life for the most part too, has been that just being in the church doesn't necessarily mean you're growing in your love for Jesus either, right? So that's not necessarily like they equals this or that, depending on, because how many people do we know like that church has become, or ministry has become something that they're all about, or they're in, or they attend, but they're actually not growing in their love. And I think, and again, I have had lots of conversations with friends, family, right, that like have walked away from the church or their faith, they're deconstructing in some form or fashion. So much of it has to do with, in their perspective and experiences, the very people that didn't actually love and grow in their love for Jesus as they were representing God or the church. And those actions from those people in some form or fashion, right, had contributed to the hurt, pain, or whatever that caused some of that in people to go like, oh, I don't need this. Like, I'll go love Jesus without the unhealthy, toxic stuff that has come from X, Y, or Z, which again, so I can see that side 100% because I've seen it, right? We both have. Yeah, we've been 100%. In those places in different, ministry settings with different leaders and seen like, that's probably not the healthiest way,
Yeah.
And again, one of the things we'll have to dive into, I think, is like the pastor pedestal conversation. 100%. We've talked about a little bit about that before, but I'd love to talk about that too. But I just bringing that to perspective to the table for those that are listening and thinking to themselves, like, your statement made, anybody that's left the church, you haven't seen somebody continue to grow, which I would agree with in large part.
Yeah. Because I don't say that to say that there's no exceptions.
Sure. Yes.
I just think like there's a reality, like just on a biblical basis, like we're supposed to grow up into the head, which is Christ.
Right.
We're supposed to mature into the head of Christ. And I just like, how do you stay connected to the head if you're not connected to the body? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I think there's a reality to there. Is there exceptions? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think that's the premium that I put on church, because of my value of being connected to the body of Christ.
Yep.
And what better way to be connected to the body of Christ than to be connected to the local church? Right. So
yeah. And I think
I say that to say that
that's a great addition to what you said. I think part of where I'm seeing people's biggest issue is just the fact that like they have seen, in their opinion, so much unhealth with the local church.
Yeah.
And there's in some way in their mind that they can have what the church represents outside of the local church, and so it may not even be that they're leaving local church or leaving the body, because they're like, I'll go do my own little body that's healthier than what I've experienced here and still be a part. But what we've had talks about before, and I think is an important thing to address, is that there are some things that are like biblically required in like what actually makes
totally.
a local church or a body,
which is a great
right. It's not just coffee talking about what Jesus is speaking to you.
Totally.
There are some things and elements that like help create what a church body and community is, that a lot of people are kind of like substituting right now for maybe a little bit more of a fake sugar kind of a what's it called, substitute, like a stevia kind of church, because they're like, well. And so I think that's part of what's a part of this as well.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like, I mean, even down to like, I don't know, I don't want to like derail, but like even like sacraments, like communion, baptism, right? Those things that like, they're physical, but there's also this mystical, spiritual side of it that has a significance to coming together as the body of Christ. And I think things like that just can get so overlooked because of it, our day and age, this authenticity and like community to the like the unhealthy side can kind of get idolized. If that makes sense.
100%.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's all about community, and it's like, but like God also like has some requirements for us on how we approach him and how we come together, and
because
what we
at
do
the end of the day,
we are
it's
together.
Actually more about honoring God.
Yes.
He or like that's the kind of the bigger one, even above some of those other things that he's also instituted or created. But no, I think this is good. I think a lot of our like friends or people in our our generation, let's just use that word. It's such a church word. It feels like, but
it totally is.
Next Gen Leadership Podcast. Let's go. We've done a podcast before. By the way. It's still actually on pod. I think it's still up there somewhere, but there's some good episodes. Remember when we were like recording an episode and you literally had COVID for the first time before COVID was a thing?
We think we had COVID. Let's be real here.
You were like,
I was coughing quite a bit.
I was like right here, and
they
I was
checked
like,
me for pneumonia.
You're really sick,
my
bro.
lungs were good.
Like, are you going to be able to make it? And then like, it was COVID.
Yeah, that was like February 2020.
With all, I just think that this is it's obviously super sensitive because of how many different people, that our generation represents that are walking through some form of figuring this stuff out.
Yeah.
And I mean, I said it a little bit ago, but I feel like I'll just represent me. I won't represent you. You can speak for yourself. I have to acknowledge the different things that have caused pain and hurt for people that have experienced church hurt, pastor hurt, leader hurt, whatever that world is. Like I see it. Like it's not like I'm not in the camp that's like grow up, snowflake, and you put your big boy or big girl pants on and move forward with life. Because I recognize, like, when I'm really honest, I recognize, like, there's some unhealthy stuff that really hurt me. And I
totally.
may have, just because of my personality, I decided to stuff it and bury it so that I could keep performing or try to perform. That was
100%.
right. And so I think that's just worth acknowledging. I don't think you disagree with that, but that this is really a conversation about, okay, yes, that is true, but what does that actually?
Or not even but.
Sure.
And
sure.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure. That's great.
I think it's really, and I think that's maybe part of the problem that maybe one gets. Like the pastors emphasize, well, but there's good churches out there, and there's good pastors out there,
and then
which is true.
Right, but then it feels like it devalues.
But then the other side can kind of just overemphasize like church hurt, church abuse, as if that's just this blanket against the entire church. So I think there really I think it's an and, like, there are good churches, and there are good pastors who love Jesus, and there's also some like really crappy things that happen, and like people make stupid decisions, and and a lot of hurt happens. Yeah,
and I think for me and for you, again, I won't speak for you, but I know we've had conversations about this. Like, ministry is really hard.
Yeah,
and it does not ever excuse like unhealthy or toxic things that could come out of leaders and create abuse or hurt for people, etc. Like, that's never an excuse, and that's not at all what I'm saying here.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of people underestimate how difficult, challenging, uniquely that it is to be in these kind of roles where you're trying to, I mean, you're trying to like still love Jesus personally, like, because all of it flows out of that.
Totally.
Like, I mean, because how many unhealthy things have we seen, pastors that have fallen, etc., because they really lost their first love. So we're trying to keep that world good. Plus figure out how to keep growing as a leader, a director, people equipper, etc., Bible teacher, a good communicator, planner, a vision caster, it's administrative, all these things, and then people's expectations that come with all that. I mean, there've been plenty of days I've been like, I'm out. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is so hard. And I do think that there can be expectations on pastors that can be unhealthy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, we've had a few guys even recently, guys that in the ministry space, more out in the like national global leadership space, guys like Matt Chandler, guys that are, they had some form of,
which Matt Chandler's is a little of an anomaly.
It was.
His a little different.
You're right. But that prodded. I don't mean.
I'm not trying to.
I think that prodded actually our conversation that we'd had about like. You just. I mean, I think I had one with somebody else too, just wrestling through what happened with him in that situation, social media, etc., where the language they used with his messaging to this woman who wasn't his wife, but they were mutual friends with his wife's friend, etc., whatever. I forget the language, but it was like too frequent, familiar. The way that they communicated felt more familiar than it should be for a program. So part of that was, and he was removed from leadership for a while to kind of go through a process, etc., etc. Everybody that saw or knew or has any care about that situation had some opinion about it. Social media, there was several that were like, he's done pastoring, and then there were some that were like
the opposite side, like, this seems like a
Have you guys seen Carl Lentz?
You guys are making a big deal out of this.
Which, by the way, like, praying for Carl, because that dude impacted my life in a way for a while, and I'm like
totally
heartbroken about how all that went down, but still believing for God's restoration there, and for the right healing with the people that he impacted. But so like the expectations on pastors, like, obviously biblically we are held to a higher standard, and we should be. As teachers of the word,
100%.
Our life and our actions and behavior and all of that should be held to a higher standard because of what we're representing. 100%. It feels like, okay, and I'm kind of stepping out on a limb a little bit.
I love limbs.
Really?
Yeah.
Cool. I don't.
You don't?
Not really.
Why not?
They can snap off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They can snap off, but at this stage in the game, this whole podcast, is stepping out on a limb. So like this
Yeah.
whole thing. So, and here's why I think it's hard for me, because I'm still a pastor,
Yeah.
and I don't want it to come across as like, hey, look at what we're going through, like feel bad for us, etc.
My
That's
heart's
not at all.
in the right place.
Yeah, and that's not what I'm trying to do here. Prefaces aside, I think I've watched there be almost this like impossible place of expectation on pastors to not ever fail or mess up.
Yeah.
Like in that Matt Chandler thing, again, not that I'm condoning it or think that, I do think that he did not live above reproach enough in that situation, and there was a lot of great probably windows or signs that he could have had that would have been like, don't continue the conversations or whatever. But like the way I watched people respond to that as a pastor, I stepped back and I thought to myself, man, I'm still human.
Yeah.
Like I'm not perfectly holy.
Yeah.
I still have sinful desires, sinful tendencies, sinful habits, or things that I have my life that I'm still working through and trying to, become more of who Christ has called me to be. I still struggle. I still have doubts.
Yeah.
What's okay to struggle with or to fail in and still be able to like be who God's called me to be, to be a pastor? Because it feels like we've got a world of, if you ever let anybody know this is some of a struggle or you messed up in this space or whatever, like cancel, goodbye, see you later.
Yeah.
And I just don't, I don't know how biblical that is when I think about the grace of Jesus, when I think about his ability to forgive and redeem and restore. But I also don't know how possible it is to stay within that standard or expectation. And so I just want to talk about, give me some of your thoughts on that. Like as a pastor who's had a pastor mom and dad and been around pastors your whole life, but you're there now as one yourself. Like, what are your thoughts about the expectation that is there?
Yeah, I think, man, I really want to be like rooted in the scriptures.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the maybe the standards that pastors are held to in our day and age, and I'm not trying to like lower. So I mean, like, I'm not trying to like lower the standards to where it's like one, like easier to be a pastor, or like or
allows us to live with more worldly flesh, whatever, and
or
like,
allows
hey,
more like space for there to be
2023 guys. Let me be,
I'm really not, but I do think that there are some things that have been added on top, that just like aren't biblical, like just like, and it's because they're not even like character things. They're more like social, like social requirements or social contracts, or like just like social expectations that people just put on you because of X, Y, and Z, whether it's like that's how they grew up in church, or that's how they think, pastors should be held to, and so it's just like, to be honest, I think a lot of people, like, I think we need to go back to the scriptures and figure, what are we actually like asking of these human beings? Because like I'm not one to say like there should be less value put on like or not less value, but like less strictness on the fact that like they're teaching the word of God.
Right.
Like that's a big deal.
Right.
And that to me is the most important thing. And to be honest, I don't think that's the most important thing to the other people who put these high standards on pastors.
Sure.
I think honestly, like their qualifications for what's being taught and how they're teaching the word is probably like less on the list. More so it's like, how are you meeting my, whatever, or how are you living up to this in my view of what a pastor should be? To be honest, I just think they're more social than they are like biblical, and like, are you teaching the word? Right. And so, and I think there's totally things about like that should be in place, like living above reproach and all of these different things. Like I want to be that, like but I just don't think that some of these really what are more like pressures. Yeah. That
I think that having that sense of I can't fail. Yeah. At times has created a tendency to, when I do fail, keep it hidden. Yeah. And that's what I've experienced with a lot of pastors. Like they don't just like have one royal fail out of the blue. Yeah. It's a degree of failing in a way that they've tried to maintain some of that, whatever, knowing that like, you have some weakness or some fail, and if it's found out or it's discovered in some way, like, goodbye, like you're done.
Yeah.
Like you're not qualified for this anymore. And a lot of times like that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Right. The Holy Spirit needs to bring in that sense of like exposure so people can get right with God, because God's not going to bless that, habitual sin that somebody is in, or something where they're keeping things in darkness. But it's that concept. That's what I want to wrestle with. It's that like the pressure that is on the pastor world to always maintain that sense of strength and wholeness and purity and all of those things, but we really like are still human like everybody else. Totally. And how do you like, where can you go fail and still be a pastor and walk in a way that's not like unhealthy or not bringing or not deglorifying, but like, that God's not getting his name run through the mud because of what you're doing. I think it's hard. I don't see this done well. Like pastors that can go, hey, I messed up like a human in this way, and it's in the light, and I'm going to continue to walk it out with the Lord and with counsel, with people who are helping me walk it out, and kind of walk that process out. I just don't see it. And I think at times for younger pastors, it creates an even greater pressure. You can't fail, because if you do, you're done. So then what do we do? That's part of the thing I wrestle with. And I want to be a pastor who lives authentically and is vulnerable with my weakness. And I've really tried to do that in this first year and a half or so leading this church, to be almost like unnecessarily vulnerable.
What do you mean by that?
Like, I think there are times where I ask myself the question, is this level of vulnerability with my congregation, with my leaders from the pulpit, is this level of vulnerability going to help or hinder the gospel? And what I mean by that is like, is someone going to listen to this and go, oh, if he's struggled or struggling with that, but he's supposed to be like my pastor, what does that say about like, there's that vibe, right? And I think that's where a lot of the unhealthy pride comes in. Like, okay, that's why I won't let anybody see that. But I've chosen to kind of go the opposite way, which is like, hey, I got nothing to hide up here. I'm not trying to be somebody I'm not. I can't, because if I try to do that, I won't be your pastor very long anyway, because I'll implode on the inside. So I'm struggling with this, or I have struggled with this. And so I've led with a greater vulnerability that I think for an older generation, especially, might be one that's like, I need a little more strength and experience and put togetherness in order to feel like
that is kind of a generational thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that might be part of it. As I'm even saying it, kind of,
because I feel like the younger generation is honestly the opposite,
right? But they're like,
they want you to be
more vulnerable. So being a pastor right now with a multi-generational church, like I've got elementary school kids that are sitting in Sunday mornings, and I've got an 85-year-old, and I mean, so that's a challenge for sure. How do you preach the scriptures, teach the scriptures, and let that be the highest form of authority, but also communicate in an effective enough way that's vulnerable to a multi-generational audience and church body? I definitely think it's been a struggle. So when you think about being a pastor, what's one of the most difficult things for you about it? And then what, on the other side of that spectrum, what do you still go like today, 2023, you're like, I love this about being a pastor. This is something I treasure about it.
I think something I think about, not very often, but because I honestly, I just don't want to sound like someone who's just like, I don't want to be, because honestly, I feel like this is just all too common, is like it just sounds like pastors don't want to be pastors. You know what I mean? It's like, then don't. Like, go get another job. Like, if this is really not what you want to do. And I think that's why so many people join the ministry and then leave, like, a couple years later, because they just, like, they didn't count the cost and realize what this actually was. Or, a myriad of different other reasons. But I think the reality, as you were talking about, just kind of like the the pressures that a church can put on pastors or people can put on a pastor. And I'm thinking about like Moses and the people of Israel, and like one Moses,
Right.
just one.
Yeah.
Wasn't multiple Moseses. There wasn't, a Moses for each part of the camp,
Right.
just one Moses, and millions of Israelites. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that to me is just crazy. And I think there's a reality to that like I don't want to sound like a whatever. I think that there's a reality that there's only one of me.
Right.
And I feel I hope people who aren't pastors hear this. Like, I feel an astronomical pressure, and I'm not even a lead pastor. I'm a youth pastor, and and an elder within our church. But I am one person, and I feel like this astronomical pressure of like, there's a ton of you, and how do I be what you're looking for in leadership and authority to all of you? Like, I don't even know what was the original question?
But yeah, like this one of the greatest struggles
Yeah.
of being a pastor, and then something on the other side of that spectrum.
Yeah, so that to me is it's really difficult. Because like, I want people to get it. I'm talking to a 7th grader yesterday who wants to get baptized, and I'm like, you know what, girl? Like, the most important thing to me is that in 30 years from now, you still love Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's a pressure on me that, like, oh my gosh, like, weighs really, like, heavily.
Yeah.
And there's only one of me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why so many pastors try to do it all themselves, and then they crumble under the pressure because they're not making disciples and delegating, and really creating this like funnel like Jesus did, to where it's
Before we go into the second part of the question, pause it. I think this is something to wrestle out to you. This has been one of the things I've wrestled out, because everything you just said I super resonate with.
Yeah.
Like astronomical pressure and weight, like that. Like, check. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's hey. And has crippled me in a lot of seasons and moments. Right. Where I'm stepping into in this season of my life now is trying to, with the Lord, go, what is my responsibility in this whole process to healthily not put on what's not mine to put on.
Yeah.
Because, part of this conversation is how much of it is the people's expectations that are at fault versus me to go, I see that expectation, but that's not who I'm going to be or who I am. And so I'm not going to actually put that expectation on.
Yeah.
And I've lived more of my life with just like trying to just and recognizing like there's actually something internally that the Lord wants to rewire, restructure, build up that's more secure and confident to go, you could bring all the pressure in the world, but I've got a different source of security and identity that's going to actually produce out of me the healthiest version of who God's called me to be, regardless of the pressure. I've done that terribly, but I'm recognizing, or at least I'm asking more now, how much of this is actually something God wants to do bigger in me.
Yeah.
So that it doesn't matter how many people have come into our church or ministry, I recognize my limits and I grow in that security. Does that make sense? I just think that's part of where I'm not there, to be very clear, but I'm walking that out, recognizing I've lived a lot of my ministry life like that, going like, I can't keep up.
Yeah.
And I feel it. I feel the weight.
Yeah.
And it's just crushing at times.
Yeah.
But do you, what's something that just bringing you absolute joy when you think about being a pastor?
Yeah. There really is nothing like doing what we do.
Yeah.
Like, there's just, and honestly, I don't know much different because it's all I've really ever done and what I grew up around.
Right.
But I think I don't even know how to explain this part of being a pastor and just the joy that it brings, but it's kind of a wide variety. Like, in the last 6 months or so, I've been to Mexico City and just like been with some Mexican pastors and just like got to hear their story and like what they're struggling with.
Yeah. It was a great trip.
Yeah. And no, I don't know many people get to do that. Right. As part of their job. Flash forward to now, and I have, me, my wife, and a teenager on my couch, like, just like walking through life with them.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
And that all fits into this one job.
Right. You're right.
And
That's
then,
a great picture.
and then part of my work is to like learn the Bible,
Right.
you know, and something I really love and like want to grow in.
Right.
I just want to know it. Like, and part of it, like in like an academic way, like I want to know it because I want to know God's word, but
Right.
there's also like
The study
like
of
even
it.
like as a not a hobby. I don't want to like belittle God's word down to a hobby, but like I just genuinely enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like I think if I wasn't a pastor, I think it would be something that I
Right.
did in my free time, you
Right.
know. And all of that fits into this one role. And then you mix into it to the moments where, you know, like I preached a message on hope the other day and really talked about like what does the Bible say about hope, and get to sit with kids as they come to the altar and deal with the fact that like they've lost hope, and the fact that like Jesus is returning is the ultimate hope that we can always have. Like good is coming, the best is yet to come, because you know like all of that fits into one role.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
I just think I don't know how to, so however you would phrase that,
Right.
that's the joy
Right.
of like that. I just like this just doesn't get old.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
So
Yeah. So when you think about the future of the church,
yeah,
the future of pastors, ministers, people
Yeah.
in that space.
the future of the church. Every podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
No, it's good. It's good. I love it.
Well, I think like we represent something here
Yeah.
at some level. Like we've been in ministry for a while. You've been in it your whole life. I've been in it pretty much my whole life. Like I worked at Chick-fil-A for a hot minute, but which was basically ministry, honestly.
Yeah. Right.
The Lord's chicken every
Yeah.
day. But like if we bail, right?
Yeah.
Like if I go, man, in 3 to 5 years, I'm done with full-time ministry.
Yeah.
And you bail because it's continued, whatever. Like there's that thought of like, yeah, I'm called to this, but I may not be my whole life. Like I can still walk in our callings outside of vocational ministry as full-time pastors. We both believe that, but there's something really special and unique about this call.
Yeah.
But like,
And that's a challenge. I love to talk about, because I think
it is a challenge. Yeah, we should
Yeah.
jump into that. I know we're probably getting close on time. Yeah, we're real close. But so basically where I'm going is like the reality that I look behind me, and I see a wave and tsunami of hurt from church leaders, etc., where there's not the same like excitement, pursuit. Not only it feels like of, well, I don't want to undersell what God is doing in the next generation, because He's doing great things.
Totally.
Obviously, you're seeing it on the front lines, like kids, young people, high school students, like they're coming to know Jesus, having encounters with His presence, give their lives to Him, etc. Be called. It feels like when I look behind me, there's more like hurt and damage that's been done. That there's gonna be this like gap of who is going to continue to like run with this stuff, like being a pastor and leading churches and ministries in a way that maybe we've experienced or we've seen it ahead of us, based on like how many people were in my own class, if you will, that were like, I want to intern, I want to be a pastor.
Totally.
You know, where, like, you know, and that again, not that many of those people are still doing it. So maybe even to my point, but I go, how do you think about that?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of responsibility do you feel like you have in that to go, okay, I'm here now. I recognize that like the generation ahead of us and ahead of them is going to not always be there.
Yeah.
What's our responsibility as young pastors to make sure that there's, I mean, I know that's the answer to this, but to make sure that there's still a church. It's not our church. It's His church. Totally. He's God. He's been doing it for a long time.
He's building it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. All that I believe. But I feel that sometimes when I go like, where are anyone that is ready to jump into this?
Yeah. Well, I'll say the unhealthy like responsibility I feel that I don't think is right is I got to convince people to join the ministry.
Right.
I just like, I can't do that.
No.
Because if I have to convince you, like, I don't think you're going to last very, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not going to work, you know? And so, I think that's a great question. I think about that a lot. especially just in the youth setting, because of how much I saw it. Like when
Right.
I was in youth,
Right.
like, dude, my first message I preached, I was at like 12. Like I wanted to be a pastor since I was like 11.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
who, no one does that anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And,
That's kind of what I'm saying.
yeah,
I don't see and hear it anywhere like I
and
used to.
Yeah. So, and I saw it all the time. I mean, there was like people who graduate high school and just just chasing after being in part of some kind of internship, you know,
Right.
at a church,
Right.
you know, and it was just like their life mission, you know, and I think there's a lot of stuff to that, you know, but, yeah, I don't think our job is to convince people to join the ministry.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to work. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that
Right.
it's going to produce longevity. I just think it's going to honestly create more destruction in the wake of just,
All the stuff that's
Yeah.
already been experienced out there. Yeah.
so, but what is our responsibility? I'm kind of at a loss. I mean, I think we can kind of take on a little too much of like, we're building the church.
Yeah.
Like people in ministry, like I hear that a lot. Like, oh man, I love that we get to build the church with Jesus. And it's like, I think we play roles, but like I think ultimately like it's Jesus building this church. You know what I mean? Like he really does it. And so I think in the same way, like I think he's gonna call Sauls who are on the opposite direction
Yes.
and bring them in, and we're gonna have some Pauls in the faith that are gonna lead this church in the next generation. And I think here's maybe what the unsaid responsibility is. I don't know. This is my just kind of just came to my head. I think it's for us to I think for our generation to not just go the trajectory, but to lead by example in that we are pursuing emotional health. We're pursuing healthy marriages, healthy families, to where this is what happens. There isn't just a bunch of pastors in church that complain about church people and complain about this, but they're like actually pastors who are like leading the church well. And it's fun because we get to follow Jesus as he builds his church. And I think I think honestly, it's not attractive to a lot of people these days because of all the stuff around church and because pastors aren't honestly putting that out that great of an example that like, this is worth giving your life to, you know? And so I think, I think of Pete Scazzaro. He says, like your marriage is the loudest gospel message you'll preach.
Yeah.
Okay. So instead of focusing on recruitment for the ministry, focus on your marriage.
So
like
good.
That's convicting to my heart. Focus on your marriage and make your marriage the loudest gospel message. And people are going to see like that is different. And so, I don't know. I think that's our first and foremost responsibility as leading the church, because if the church is supposed to grow up, and I think part of growing up is actually not just point. I told you this the other day, not just pointing people to the cross, but saying, hey, we need to get on this cross. And when we get on the cross, we actually don't just talk about the words of Jesus, but we actually practice the lifestyle of Jesus. And that's actually going to create some more healthy people and some more people that are like, this is worth giving my life to. And maybe that's it. But beyond that, I don't really know, because I'm done with people just seeing cool pastors and thinking I want to do that too. And then within 7 years maybe at the most, and they're just like out and gone and not really committed to the church anymore. And I don't want that.
I don't.
And so.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. That example side of things, living an example with their life, the holistic life, not even just like in the ministry, like the marriages, like the way that you love your kids, like those kind of things could be the very thing. If we do those things really well, the people go and he's a pastor. I just see him as a great husband, and that's what I want. And I know that kind of stuff could be there.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. This is the wrap up kind of question to close up the podcast. like I kind of mentioned at the beginning, this whole thing is about having conversations with people who have impacted me, and the hope of.
Which I love that idea, by the way. The 52 Project.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, for me, like whether anybody watches this or not,
that's a cool name.
Yeah, anybody watches this whole thing, like for me, I just get to have this.
Yeah.
Like if there are no cameras, right? Like I'm getting to have scheduling 52 conversations with like people that I mean, dude, this is a treasure. So made an impact, but the hope from the conversations is that it really helps people get freed up from the things holding them back.
Yeah.
So they can be built up into who they were made to be. When you think about your life right now, what is the greatest thing that you feel like is holding you back that you wish you could get freed up from to be more of who you were made to be? Or maybe one of the things, not the greatest, but like what's, because I mean, we all have lots, but like so what comes to your heart when you think like, man, this is like vulnerable Wes for a second. I feel like has held me back. I would love to get freed up from this to walk more in who God's called me to be and who I was made to be.
Yeah. I think for me, I don't know if this is too general, but it's just what comes to mind. And I can go maybe into a little bit of the specifics, but you know, when I think about being built up into who I'm created to be, I think about like, that's going to require some change, some transformation. Like I tell my students that like, if you're not changing, like if you're not like looking different because of your relationship with Jesus, like something's wrong.
Yeah. Something's disconnected.
Yeah. Right. Because we need to be, we need to be changing. And I'm reminded of like scripture, like Romans 12, like we're transformed by the renewing of our mind.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that holds me back more than anything is my thoughts and like just staying stuck in my head.
Yeah.
You know, and whether that's thinking about what people think, you know, or I think honestly for me, like one of the biggest thing is like I see me through the lens of everybody else before I see me through like, you know, God's lens, but like even like my own, like who am I, you know? And so I think, I just, it frustrates the crap out of me. I don't want to be stuck in my head and miss what's in front of me, miss what God's doing in me. And I think part of that, and here's maybe where I'll tie it, because I think this is the biggest part of just like, of what I feel like holds me back in terms of just like my identity, who I am, is getting stuck in my head, my mind, and my thoughts, but pertaining to the topic of like recognition, influence, and like being known for something great.
Yeah.
And maybe this is the biggest one, but like I'm 26, I feel behind. Why? Why do I feel that way? Like, why do I feel like I should be further down the road? And I just think, what a great tactic of the enemy. Like,
yes,
to just like, you know, you should have had kids earlier, you know, or you should have gotten this piece of growth down by now so that you could be really influencing people.
Yeah.
You know? And I think part of that goes back to like my childhood. Like, I heard something the other day, is like, you got to deal with your trauma, drama, daddy, and mama.
Yeah.
But like, I think back to my childhood and how many people, like, in good intent, I would assume, you know?
Sure.
But like, you're going to preach to thousands, right?
Right. Because I spoke words over
like I was
you,
a good
like,
talker, and so I just feel like I got that a lot.
Yeah.
And that did something to me. So like, if anything, like, your words matter. Like, be careful what you like prophesy over somebody in the name of Jesus, you know, in the like God's thus saith the Lord, you know, because it's really created this thing to me of like, yeah, like one day it's just gonna hit. And I'm just gonna have this like crazy influence and recognition, and it's like, and so it just changes the way I see life. It changes like, I gotta get moving. Like, I'm behind.
Yeah.
I told you, I'm in my late 20s. You know, I'm 26. I'm closer to 30, you know, and I got to get moving, you know, I got to get going. And I'm just, I don't know, I've been reading a lot of these, I'm trying to follow some of these people that just kind of are a little bit countercultural.
Yeah.
kind of like a resistance to kind of just the social trajectory of things and culture. And a lot of them are talking about, they're like, oftentimes those people are the people that are like studying the people like of like back when, you know, like ancient people, monks, saints, you know, all these different people. And I just been reading a lot of those things, and I'm seeing these people that like this one, you know, nun who was later recognized as a saint, and she did ministry for like 10 years from when she was like a teenager to like 24, and she lived a quiet life, you know, and it wasn't thousands and millions and all these different things. She just did what she could with what she had, what was in front of her, and then was later recognized for her faithfulness. Right. Later recognized for her devotion to the Lord.
Yeah.
And that's enough.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think the biggest thing holding me back is just like getting stuck in my head of like, I'm behind. I don't have, and part of that's a cultural thing of like, everybody wants to be famous these days.
Right.
Like everyone
wants to go viral.
Yeah. Everyone wants to go viral, start a YouTube channel, you know.
I mean, YouTube channels are just stupid. So
like, you know, make money off of being an influencer. Yeah. And like, I so want to like just die to that, but there's just a piece of me that just like, I just want to be known.
Yeah.
I want to be recognized. So I think if anything that's what's going to like keep me from like the destiny, you know.
Sure.
That word's a little weird for me because I just feels like it's too set in stone almost, you know. But
no,
I think if anything, that's gonna keep me from doing what God's, you know.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for your vulnerability.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. That's super real, and I think a lot of people will resonate. I know I do with that, and man, to encourage you, you aren't behind.
Yeah.
You're the way you authentically live your life. Love your wife, love your daughter, love the people God's put in front of you to serve, love your friends. I mean, I've been so loved by you as a friend over these last 5 years. You've been one of my favorite relationships. That honestly, there's been a few times where, as we've wrestled in ministry in difficult seasons over this last 5 years, where we're like, gosh, the rain in Washington, let's go. and for Holly and I, like it was counting the cost of the relationships we would have to leave. Yeah. And you and Amanda were always in like the top 2 of those over the last 5 years for us. Of like, if we moved today, who would we be like, gosh dang it, we're not in the same area with them to live life anymore. And so and that happens because you just were you and embraced Holly and I and, you know, our kids. And so all of that has made such an impact on me. And so, I mean, the way you preach authentically, the way you step into that calling that God's put on your life to do those things, it's so inspiring to me, has been, still is, will continue to be. You're one of my favorite preachers.
I appreciate that.
That's living. Like anytime you're preaching, I can't wait. I'm not even like, oh, okay, well, I know Wes, and it's like, how is the Lord going to use him today? And so, I mean, I know deep down, you know those things, maybe wrestle with them at times,
totally.
But you're not behind me, and you are right where the Lord has positioned you guys to be for such a time as this, to be faithful, and you're doing it. You're being faithful with what He's given you, with what you've got, with who's in front of you, and that's making an eternal impact. And the days might come where, you know, the door out to the platform has thousands of people waiting for you to preach, and when that day comes, how God is forging you now.
Amen.
In the smallness of things at times, or the insignificance of things that you might feel like are insignificant, is building the character of that person that will be able to go out there and not see that audience of thousands any less or any more than the audience of 100 that they've got. So, and that's who you are. So I love you, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast today. What a privilege it is to get to be in your life, and for me to get to, I've moved from, nobody else will get this joke, and that's okay. I've moved from having you nestled under my wing to feeling like I'm like on the sidelines, like just cheering you on and excited to see how the Lord's just going to continue to use your life. I'm all in on Wes and Amanda and Sunday. So thank you. Yeah. Thanks for your life, for living authentically for the Lord.
Love you.
Love you too. Well, there you go. Episode 4 wrapped up. Thanks for listening. See you later.